Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Telford Wrekin full council meeting. Can I first ask for a call for a 1 minute silence in tribute to Councillor Liz Clare that passed away last week. So if everyone can stand, please. Thank you, everyone.
I would like to call on the Leader of the Council to pass some comments, please.
Mr. Speaker, Liz Clare was a fantastic, brilliant community campaigner and always put the interests of her residents in Donington at the heart of everything she did and at the heart of everything she said. And I can say that in all the meetings that I ever had with Liz, I can assure you that the residents of Donington that their interests were always at the top of the table, whether it be in terms of the community centre, the library, the parade, the roads, the footpaths, the money that she thought and believed, and she was quite right, that area required. But, Mr. Speaker, I also have a slight confession to make in that as her group leader, I always got a little bit nervous when she stood up at full council meetings, so I wasn't ever quite sure what she was going to say, whether or not that was going to be reflecting this group's policy on one thing or another. But what I can absolutely say is what she said at council and the various other meetings that we have always came from the heart. And Mr. Speaker, this council, Donington, Telford Wrekin, is poorer for not having Liz. Her hard work, her opinions, her beliefs, her values. As one of the longest serving councillors, I believe, Mr. Speaker, she served this borough well. Mr. Speaker, her friends and her family, and in particular her family, who she spoke about all of the time, can be proud, as we are, Mr. Speaker, of her contribution to this borough.
Councillor James Lavery.
Mr. Speaker, Liz is my fellow councillor for Donington. When I was canvassing the ward in May, one of the common things I got on the door was, "Oh yes, I'll vote for Liz. She's done this, she's done that, she's done everything else for me." And most of these things that she'd done were non-council issues. She'd helped them in social ways, welfare ways and other ways. She dedicated time not just to council business, but to the community as a whole. And I'm proud to have served with her on this council and with her on the parish council, and send my heart to her family. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Liz, where to start, really? I've known Liz for some 37 years or so, which is a long time. And one of my overriding memories of Liz was in those early days, she dressed in some rather risque underwear for charity, which is something I've never forgotten, but probably summed Liz up to a T, is that she would do anything to help people and enter into the spirit of it. But it was her work as chairman of the old leisure committee that I particularly remember, with great fondness as well. Liz was always forthright. I was also scared of what Liz had to say. And she called a spade a shovel. And I've got to say that I admired her for that. And every time we spoke, which was actually quite often, we'd have a chat if we met at meetings, and she would always ask if I remembered a particular working group on the Leisure Committee, where we were meeting with the YMCA one evening in Wellington. And I remember that we all walked out of that meeting. It was quite a fiery meeting in High Dudgeon, which Liz had actually planned meticulously beforehand. And once we were out of the door, she had a great smile. But she always asked me if I remembered that meeting. And again, it's something that I will never forget. She was a good chairman. She ran that committee with a firm hand, but she was also fair. And I had a lot of time for Liz, a tremendous amount of time. In those days, I suppose all councillors worked pretty closely together. And with Liz, that was no exception either, regardless of politics. Now, I was genuinely sad to hear of Liz's death. I know that she'd gone through a sad time after the loss of her husband. And my sympathies really do go out to the family, Liz's family. I don't think we'll ever replace her. And as I say, I've known her over 37 years, and she is a character and somebody who gave her all to a ward and this council and the borough, and I personally will never forget her.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I always admired Liz because she treated people like people and as individuals and not just politicians. She, even when I first came on the council, would speak to me as a lowly opposition councillor and didn't just look to me as being the enemy. And in terms of what Councillor Davis said about he was never quite sure which way she was going to vote, I have really happy memories on a planning committee where she actually voted against what was then the Labour group on a planning issue in the Shawbirch ward. And I can still see Dave Davis's leg jigging away like the clappers underneath the table. He still managed to get the casting vote in, bless him. But no, she was great. She was fair-minded. She stood up for what she thought was right. She spoke from the heart. She was a lioness for both her ward and the community. And she'll be sadly missed. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I have other councillors who've indicated, and I'll take them in the order that I wrote them down. So, Councillor John Thompson.
I was born in Donington. One of our neighbours was Liz's parents. I've known Liz nearly all my life. Liz worked at the Ministry of Defence in Donington. She was an excellent, caring boss to her colleagues. Liz noticed the shortage of youth club provision in Donington, so Liz started a youth club. One of her, from the collection from Liz's funeral, will go to the youth clubs in Donington. Liz was an hard-working parish councillor, district councillor and borough councillor. In 1991, I was elected onto Donington Parish Council. Liz gave me support and help. She gave us advice. She would never be beaten on finance, even like others wanted to, but Liz was really hot on finance. Liz worked hard for the Donington community and supported our local shops and also our local fish and chip shop. Even last year, Liz was fighting for our pensioners' Christmas vouchers, which had been cut from the parish council. I don't want to say which party, but that had been cut by a certain party. Liz will be sadly missed on Telford Wrekin and missed by the residents of Donington. She was really missed, and sadly, hope as many people attend the funeral.
Right, thank you. Councillor Eric Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's only appropriate. I mean, I've been a member of this council, not continually, but since '91, and worked on a number of bodies that Liz was a part of. And what I can say is, although we might not have agreed too often politically, that didn't come between us. and we often had a little chat after council meetings and had a talk. And one thing about Liz, she had a sense of humour, which didn't come across maybe too much in council meetings, but outside it did. Just to give you one small example, because I agree with what people have been saying, wonderful councillor, dedicated councillor, and will be sadly missed. But one thing that made me really smile, so it's not too long ago, it's a couple of months ago, I was actually with my wife, and we decided to pop into Home Bargains in Donington. And as I was walking in the door, Liz was coming out, and she said, "Oh, you're out of your comfort zone here, aren't you, Eric?" And I said, "Well, if you grew up in the little terraced house like I did, with no bathroom and outside toilet, I'd call this posh Liz." And she smiled at that, and that's a member I'll always treasure, because she was a great councillor, a lovely lady, and she will be sadly missed.
Right, thank you. And Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
I've actually known Liz...
Microphone.
Sorry, I've actually known Liz an awful long time, on both sides of the fence. I first came across Liz as a young officer working at Telford Wrekin, and I have to say, when she used to walk down the corridors, well, actually it was all open plan in those days, down 3rd floor, there was a quaking amongst the officers for Liz, because Liz spoke as she felt. You knew exactly what it was that she thought. If she'd asked you to do something, you actually had to do it, make sure it's correct, because Liz could see through. So you could never try and fudge an issue with Liz. She was very passionate about what she did. She really was fearless. I've heard that word used tonight, and she was. She truly believed in everything she did, and she cared about her community. I remember her telling me once about, "Oh, don't be worried, you can do anything you want to in life." And she told me that she was the first ever woman to become an executive officer at the COD, and we are going back quite a few years, and I think that says everything about Liz as a person. As I said, she spoke from the heart, and she was never afraid to speak out. And when I actually changed roles years later and became a councillor, Liz came back to me, and we did talk about the good old days when I was an officer and she was a councillor, but she was so helpful. And if there was anything you ever wanted advice, she was always there. She would always find time for you. But basically, to me, Liz was such a passionate, caring person, and she had her own way. And I actually think we could all take a leaf out of her book and follow some of Liz's way.
Right, thank you. I'd like to echo those comments tonight. I was first elected alongside Liz in 1979, and so I've known her at least that long. And yeah, she was a great member of this authority and precursor authority, so I'd like to echo those comments. So I thank you for that. We have also lost somebody in Telford, the founder and chief exec of TACT, Telford Aftercare Team, a reformed drug addict who turned his knowledge, charm, because he had that, and skills to found TACT. And I am told, and I've met him a few times, he helped an awful lot of people out of their addictions. And for that, he has the greatest credit and respect of our people in Telford. We've also lost other friends of the borough. In fact, the list is now too long, but I'd like you to stand in silence for a moment again to remember Rob and those other friends of the borough that we have lost recently. Thank you. Right, thank you. Right, I would now like to call upon Reverend Keith Osmond-Smith to conduct prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Good evening, and if it's not too late, Happy New Year to everyone. Let's spend some time in prayer. Almighty and loving God, we thank you for the lives that have been well lived. Over many years, our community has been formed and moulded by people with big vision and bigger hearts. So tonight, as we've remembered those who have so recently passed from our sight, we honour them, and each one of us in our own way acknowledge the inestimable value of the ones now lost to us. We thank you that their impact on the lives of so many doesn't stop, but continues in achieving the vision and intent of those our friends, whose deaths we mourn, but whose lives we celebrate. So now at the start of another year, this year of 2020 brings with it promises, expectations and challenges with all their consequences for this borough. For many times are still hard, and we pray for our community and all who live and work within it, and for our council who face the task of juggling the budget with even ever more restricted funding. We thank you again for the good people gathered in this place tonight who've been called and elected and have come from so many different places and responsibilities to meet and be about the business of our borough. And we thank you also for the work of the officers of this council, for all the committees and subcommittees. We commend to your safekeeping as this year begins our Mayor and Mayoress, our Speaker, the leaders of the Council and the Opposition, all the members of this Chamber, and the Chief Executive and his staff. We pray for all who have gathered here tonight, grateful afresh for these friends who give so much of their time and effort in the service of others. And we ask your blessings on all who continue to work throughout our borough, striving to bring hope and relief to those enmeshed in the unexpected and unsought trap of food poverty, and for those who are suffering financial hardship. Lord God, we thank you for all those who spend their lives trying to make the lives of others better, for those in the public service, for the good Samaritans of our day, and for those who give themselves to charitable works of service for the good of others. So we meet tonight and pray that we may know the satisfaction and assurance of effective service and the peace that this brings. Help us to resolve to use all of our time more effectively in the life of service that all follow. And at this and other times and in other places, you grant continuing wisdom, courage, compassion and respect for each other as we move forward in this year. These things we ask. Amen.
Thank you. Right, have there been any apologies received prior to the meeting?
Mr Speaker, we've received apologies from Councillors Jackie Loveridge, Jane Pinter and Concepta Cassar.
I'd like to congratulate Concepta and her partner on the birth of their little baby, Elwyn. I was rather hoping they'd call him Arnie, but it didn't happen. But I have sorry? Councillor, I was going to come to that, but thank you. Just cut me short when I was congratulating our colleague. Right. Any other apologies received? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Right. Any declarations of interest?
A declaration of interest under 10.4, I appear in the Youth Court from time to time.
Any other declarations of interest? Right, move on. Right. The previous minutes, then, of the meeting of 19th of September. Moved. Who moved? Thank you. Seconded? Councillor Overton. Right. Do you confirm that they put it to a vote? Is it agreed? It's agreed unanimously. Thank you. The Mayor, you have to sign the minute. Are you signing the minutes?
Yeah. There's also the other one as well.
What other ones?
There's two.
Is there?
17th of October as well.
Oh, and the 17th of October, yes. Do you agree that they're be moved?
Okay.
Show of hands. Excellent. Thank you. I missed that. Right, you're signing both?
I am.
Right, I'd like to invite the Speaker now to... Sorry, I'm the Speaker. I'd like to invite the person second down the line, the leader.
Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. As already has been mentioned about the sad passing of Rob Ayres, I'd like just to take a second or two, if I can, just to reflect on the very sudden and unexpected death of Rob. As already has been mentioned, he was the founder and the chief executive of Telford Aftercare Team and Strickland House in Wellington. He set up the Centre for Recovering Addicts and people with mental health issues. His work through the peer-to-peer recovery charity changed lives, and it also saved lives. It's been my pleasure to know Rob over many years, and I pay tribute, as I'm sure we all do, to his amazing work. Last year was another busy and successful one for the Council, and we look forward to many further opportunities in 2020. We welcome our new Chief Executive, David Sidaway, who shares the Council's commitment to protect, care and invest to create a better borough and to continue to deliver on the 155 pledges of this administration. I'm delighted to report that in 8 months, 1/3 of our pledges have already been completed. The remainder are underway and are partially completed. Highlights include a new campaign to recruit local foster carers so children can live locally, the securing of Stronger Families funding to improve the quality of work with families by Family Children's Services over the next 4 years, investment in the borough schools to ensure adequate school places provision now and for the future, including expansion plans. This will be a total of £35 million in addition to the £200 million already invested in our schools over the last decade. 89% of our primary school children are in schools judged to be good or outstanding, and there are 98% of our children in good early years provision. Investment into a range of commercial, industrial, retail and leisure developments across the borough, including the Newport Innovation Park, the first agritech park in the whole of the country, work on which is now well underway and is expected to create 950 jobs. And we now hit the target of making superfast Telford broadband available to 98% of the borough. We've fixed around 800 potholes, cleaned more than 15,000 gullies, resurfaced 8 miles of road and 30 miles of footpaths. This administration will continue to protect, invest and care to create a better borough. This year, on our first morning back, we began in earnest with a meeting of the Council's Cabinet. It reported on the massive success of our unique land deal partnership. The headlines are quite remarkable. The delivery of 21 commercial sites, 10 sites for residential development and more than 1,100 jobs. We expect to continue with this and go from strength to strength. As part of our budget plans, we're seeking to create a new £60 million growth fund to further help business expansion in the borough and to double the number of new place homes, our hugely successful private homes company for rent. This will create both significant new assets for this council, but also, importantly, Mr. Speaker, provide decent homes to rent for our people and decent industrial units for our businesses to buy or rent. The Cabinet backed a review of the local plan, which provides an opportunity to embed the council and the community's priorities to establish what we describe a forest community, with a strategy to create more jobs and homes for local people while managing and protecting and enhancing green spaces. We are investing a further £5 million to help boost our high streets and our borough towns through our Pride in our High Street scheme. A week tomorrow, we will take on civil parking enforcement to help combat illegal parking. Through sustainable Telford Wrekin initiatives, we will continue to encourage as many people in the borough as possible to reduce single-use plastics, cutting the borough's footprint. The spring and summer will see another exciting programme of events, including Spring into St George's Day, the Balloon Fiesta and the Carnival, and of course, Mr. Speaker, the Armed Forces Day, which we will mark continually. Our new Telford 2020 fund, totalling £285,000, will support a number of tried and tested community-led funding schemes, the first beginning to mark the 75th anniversary of VE and VJ Day, and we look forward to a number of events from our community, and we, as a council, stand ready, Mr. Speaker, to support them. There are lots of things to look forward to, but 2020 will also bring challenges. Together across the chamber, regardless of political colour, persuasion or belief, let's work together Mr Speaker, to create a better borough by protecting, investing and caring in the place that we call home.
Right. Thank you, Mr Leader. I'd now like to call upon the Mayor to address the meeting on his activities.
Thank you. I'll keep it short and sweet. As you can all see from today's agenda, my schedule of mayoral engagements over the past few months for both myself and my deputy have been extremely busy. I just would like to thank you all for your valued support in fulfilling this role across our wonderful borough. Just a date for your diary, on the 27th of March I will be holding at the Valley Hotel in Ironbridge a 1920s murder mystery event in support of my chosen charity, the YMCA, who in their 160th year they're raising funds not just for the YMCA as a whole but also the Holly Project, the Freedom Programme, Thrive and other bits of it. I'd just like to ask for your support for this event. I'm hoping that everyone that is able to go will go, because I think it's something different and it's going to be a very interesting evening. So I'd just like to thank you for your valued support and your continued support over the next few months. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Right, public questions, you will note that they've been included in the agenda. So I'd like to call upon Yvonne Hill to ask her question, if you would please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the inclusion of taxi licensing into the independent inquiry, into the terms of reference for the independent inquiry in child sexual exploitation. Also, the Council's recent focus on cross-border licensing. What help can the local residents give to ensure that only drivers licensed within Telford Wrekin Council can drive within our borough?
Right, thank you. Councillor Overton, you're going to reply?
Is that working? Yep. I would like to thank Yvonne for raising this question. As you're aware, as a Cabinet, we feel strongly about the problems of cross-border hiring that have come about since the Deregulation Act of 2015, which permitted operators to subcontract jobs to another private hire operator licensed by any other local authority in England and Wales. We have and will continue to lobby central government for changes to legislation that will, amongst other matters, see that all private hire journeys must start or end within the local authority where the driver and vehicle are licensed. This will give the licensing authority greater control over public safety. Local residents can help us achieve this change in legislation by also lobbying their local MPs. In addition, residents can, when booking private hire vehicles, inform the private hire operator whom they're making the booking with that they would prefer a Telford and Wrekin Council licensed driver.
Right, thank you. Do we have supplementaries? No. I'd like to invite Carol Scott, if you would ask your question, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, for letting me ask a third question on this topic, as you know, over the years. Can the Council advise whether they are actively and constructively working to implement a concessionary travel scheme, possibly linked to a TLC card, for 1950s women still affected by delayed state pension, therefore no entitlement to bus pass? Or was the commitment to be a WASPI supporting council just empty words?
Right, thank you. Councillor David Wright, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank Carol for her question. Can I just reiterate and make it very clear that the administration is very sympathetic towards the WASPI campaign, and you'll be aware that at a national level there was significant debate about this issue during the recent general election. We do take the issue of public transport across the borough extremely seriously, and given our determination to do what we can to make the borough the best place to live, work, learn and do business for the benefit of all residents, having a fit-for-purpose public transport infrastructure is a key aspiration for us. There are significant pressures on public transport budgets. We're continuing to explore opportunities that may arise and have provided some initial pump priming to consider and explore how we might develop the kind of scheme that you, Carol, allude to. However, I have to say this will be expensive and quite complex to administer. We would welcome some commitment from the government to support a national programme to assist people who have had their state pension delayed. We will continue to consider this matter. In the meantime, we're developing our integrated transport strategy to ensure we're best placed to benefit from any external funding that may become available to assist.
Right, thank you. Item 9 on your agenda is Cabinet decisions since the last meeting of the Council. That is the 10th of October and 2nd of January. Does any Cabinet member wish to raise anything? Right, then any questions on those items? Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Thank you, Arnold. I have to ask myself that occasion as well, Arnold, so don't worry. It's about the one on the 2nd of January with regards to the local plan. So if I could talk a little bit on that, Arnold, I'd be grateful. Just a question.
Go on. We do have questions about the local plan.
We do, about the housing aspect, but I've got a separate question to that. Okay. By opening up the local plan for review, and I quite understand it's one of those things legally we have to do every now and again, but sometimes opening up a local plan is a bit like opening up Pandora's box. Well, it can certainly feel like that for local residents. When you have a plan put before you, you may disagree or agree with it, it gives you certainty about where things can or can't be developed, both industrial and housing. To have a review means to reopen it again for that consideration to come forward. So my concern is, and I just want to ask the Cabinet member this following question, given the concerns that residents will have, that developers and others will be putting forward new sites which aren't currently in the local plan for consideration for the future, both industrial and housing, can he assure the Council and the general public out there that every effort as possible will be made to communicate all the various stages that we have to go through with the general public? It became obvious to me through the local elections that most people, and I mean this in the best possible way, are a little bit ignorant and not quite sure what a local plan is until they suddenly realise there's a factory going up across the road. And this little local plan is a little booklet which gives everyone an idea of what can and can't be built. Can he assure everyone that this revision to the local plan at every stage the public will be communicated to in whatever way we can to make them aware of what's going on in that process? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Wright, do you wish to answer?
I can confirm that we will use the official process to review the plan. Clearly, this is a plan review, so the local plan remains in place, it's in force. We will carry out planning decisions on the basis of the existing local plan. We have to be cautious that we don't reopen and rewrite the entire plan. That's not part of this process, and we have to demonstrate to the inspector that the plan is in place and we are carrying out a review. I will touch a bit further on these matters clearly when we discuss one of the motions before the Council tonight. What I can say very clearly is the process will be open and clear. Members will be able to ask questions throughout the process at Council, and we will ensure that the public are fully consulted as we move forward. Developers will be asked to come forward with additional sites. There will be a call for sites. We'll have to consider those carefully, and we'll do that hand in hand with the public.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Oh yes, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question on investment, which Lee alluded to, and pothole filling.
Is that in the...
Well, it's sort of in there, don't worry about it. Can you tell me when you're going to get back to filling potholes in the rural area?
Is that a question? Anybody want to...
Mr. Speaker, local ward members are elected to represent their areas, and as part of that, Mr. Speaker, they should follow up case work that they either themselves come across or members of their public. That is what ward members are paid for. If Councillor Bentley needs some help with that, then I'll be happy to oblige.
Right, thank you.
Can I thank you for that? If you just send me the tarmac, I'll get it done.
Very good. I wouldn't want you to exert yourself, though. No.
Get somebody to do it.
Right. Okay. Right, 10A or 10.1, financial management. Councillor Lee Carter.
Like to make, please, Speaker.
Okay. Seconder, Councillor. Oh, seconded. Right. Any other councillors on 10.1, financial management? 10A? No? Right. I move that the recommendations be voted upon. All those in favour, please show. Any against? No. NEMCOM. Thank you. Housing Investment Programme.
Mr. Speaker, I move the recommendations on the report. This is an extension of the loan facility relating to New Place. The leader has already mentioned tonight how successful that project has been. It hasn't always had cross-party support. It's one of the things that this Labour Council is incredibly proud of. We want to extend the loan facility by £5 million so we can advance the project. I recommend it to members.
Okay. Seconder? Councillor Overton, seconded. Any comments? Yes, Councillor Doug Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. It's 1.3 on the report. I mean, it mentions about 44 affordable housing. Can you just clarify? So, is New Place doing affordable housing now? Because my understanding was that it was for market rent.
Right. Can you answer that?
Mr. Speaker, yes, I can answer that. We have, in the early years of developing the portfolio, concentrated on market rent. Most landlords do that as they develop their housing stock and firm up the financial base and viability of their business. What we're endeavouring to do now is include affordable housing units in the sites that we are developing. We're also including additional units for people with supported housing needs. We've also done a superb partnership, one of our new sites, with the local hospital, where we've done an early bird offer scheme to NHS workers. So we're delivering on a number of commitments. We are putting affordable housing into the programme. We are meeting specialist and supported housing needs, and we're working with partners to ensure that people have access to high quality accommodation. This programme is about setting a benchmark also for private landlords so that they can see what a really good landlord does in the town. We believe New Place is a good landlord, and we intend to expand the programme using the extension of the loan facility outlined in the recommendations here before you tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Eade.
Thank you. Following on from that question, I wonder if David could confirm that the Council would look at increasing the target number of affordable housing, which I think is particularly low.
Thank you. Do you wish to comment?
I've already indicated that we started early on in the programme to develop market rent housing. That was to ensure the viability of the business model around New Place. I'm keen to expand the number of affordable housing units as we move into further sites, and I'm keen to work with other partners to ensure that we have a good mix on those sites. We have a good platform of market rent property. It provides a good asset base that's been established for the company. I'd like to see us do more affordable housing. I'm sure that would be welcomed right across the chamber.
Right. Thank you. Right. The recommendations at 212223 on 10.3 Housing Investment Programme have been moved and seconded. Are you all in favour in accepting them? All right. That appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Right. 10.4 Youth Justice Plan. Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every Youth Justice Service is required to produce the annual Youth Justice Plan, which outlines how the Youth Justice Service in the area are provided, funded and composed. The plan has been prepared by the Youth Justice Service in line with the content requirements published by the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales on behalf of the Secretary of State. Cabinet gave the Youth Justice Plan 1920 approval at its meeting on the 2nd of January, and I now move that the Youth Justice Plan 10.4 be approved and endorsed, and that the West Mercia Youth Justice Service responsibilities are noted.
Right, thank you. Is there a seconder? Right. I got Councillor Rajmeta was faster. Right, thank you. Right, any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Tomlinson.
Yes, I'm looking at page 45 on the reoffending, and it's good to note that actually our numbers are coming down. When we hear the horrific cases going on in certain cities, particularly in London, about youth offending, it's good to see that Actual numbers are coming down, so it's testament to all those that work within the system that are trying to help keep people out of crime and offending, and also for the police. And we've got, hopefully now with increasing police numbers, we can do even more work to help combat crime. So it's good to see our numbers are coming down. Thank you.
Thank you. Any need to respond? It's just a statement. Any other questions, comments? Right, then at page 42, recommendation 2.1, approval and endorsement, and that the YGS responsibilities are noted. Is that agreed? All those in favour, please show. All right, again, that appears, apart from Councillor Davis, who declared an interest, that's unanimous. Thank you. Council Tax Support Scheme, 10.5. Councillor Raj Mehta.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the motion, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? That's seconded. Councillor Lee Carter. Right. Any questions or comments? Councillor Tomlinson.
I welcome the review on the scheme and the banding system to make it a lot simpler and easier to administer, and that's to be welcomed. It's also revenue neutral, I believe, or it's intended to be over its span of time. But it's disappointing in some ways, and it's no fault of the local authority, but since it was given to local authorities to administer and fund these schemes and the government funding came away, obviously a lot of councils up and down the country have had to reduce the discounts that we gave to people who are in dire need at times to be able to pay their council tax. So although I welcome the fact it's neutral, I would hope that in years to come, if they ever do come back again, and I can still see blue bloods over this White Cliffs of Dover, but if ever we do get revenue come back in again, for these really hard-pressed people that are finding it hard just to pay a council tax, and you wonder whether they should be paying council tax at all if they are hard up, that we can in the future look to expand or increase the discounts on these schemes, at least back to where they were originally. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, do you need to comment and answer now? Do you accept that? Does anybody else wish to comment? Right, then recommendations on page 74. Endorse a new council tax reduction scheme. Is that the right one? Yeah. And approve the redesigned council tax reduction hardship assistance policy. All those in favour, please show. Again, that appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Right. Item 11, scrutiny annual report, and this is for noting only. Do you wish to present the report, Councillor Derek White?
Thank you. I'll leave it for noting.
You do what, sorry? For noting, right. Okay, do we agree that it be noted? That is agreed, thank you. Oh, did you want to comment again? A comment, yes?
Can I answer me, Pan? Sorry, Arnold. The point is, I welcome the work we're doing on scrutiny, but I would also welcome further officer investment time in it. In the past, we had dedicated officers for scrutiny who weren't just part of the democratic services mix. They knew what they were doing, they had time and time was set aside. I know things are really hard and I know things are really tough financially, but to make scrutiny work, it needs more dedicated officer time. And I look forward to that time when we can increase the capacity of that. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Do you agree that it be noted?
I'll address that in the future, in the next agenda item.
Right, thank you. Noted? Agreed? Right, NEMCOM, thank you. Setting of the council tax base. Would you like to...
Just move the three recommendations on page 125.
Okay, is that seconded? Councillor Raj Mehta, thank you. 125. Any debate? Anybody wish to raise anything? The recommendations on 125. Little 1, little 2, little 3. Right, all those in favour, please show. That appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Right, recommendations from boards and committees. The 13.1 Audit Committee Review of the Speak Up Whistleblowing Policy of 2019. Councillor Nathan England.
This is a recommendation from the Audit Committee that the Council adopts the Speak policy pages 135 146. This is a whistleblowing policy. It's important that we promote an honest and open culture and commit to the highest possible standards of transparency and accountability. This policy supports the Council's anti-fraud and corruption policy and makes it clear that concerns can be raised without fear of reprisals. Members may have noted that there are a couple of minor errors due to change of the job titles. This will be amended prior to publication.
Right, thank you. Is there a seconder? Right. Councillor Charles Smith. Charles. Yeah, I know. Just get in there. Right. Any other questions, comments? Do you agree the recommendation, page 135, that members of the Audit Committee recommend the Council adopts the updated Speak Up whistleblowing policy of 2019? All those in favour, please show. That appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Scrutiny Management Board, 13.2. What page is that? Page 143. Councillor Derek White.
You've noticed in the report the changes we've made to scrutiny. Now, this year and last year, scrutiny has been under tremendous pressure regarding officer time in particular. It just shows just how much this council has cut back. And it's cut back for all the right things, but at the end of the day, democratic services in particular has suffered brutally. And it's suffered in all areas. We have to. And the first thing I did, I sat and talked with the leader regarding the pressures on scrutiny. And he agreed and has tried to actually make sure that we are going to get the tools to work with, because we need that tools to work with. Now, unfortunately, what we don't have the Fionas, and we don't have those staff that we had 4 years ago when I was last chair. They had years and years of experience. We have not got that, and they're not available on the market at this present moment in time. We will try and train up the people that we've got at the present to do the job, but it's going to be very, very difficult. You can't replace the experience that we had of 14 years of scrutiny, working with officers and building up that teamwork, and suddenly losing it all in one foul swoop. We're in a different world, but we have got to make it work, and we will make it work. Despite the difficulties with the officers, we've met as Scrutiny Management Board, we've talked about what the problems are, how to reorganise it, and really set out a new basis. But then we had the election, we've had I've never seen so much training given to councillors in all my life. We spent the first 3 months seeming to go into every training exercise, even how to use the bloody toilet. But, sorry. But we're now in a position that we've been able to reorganise, sit down, talk, and work out what we're going to do. Why do we want to do it? And we have got so many really important issues that we're going to have to look at. Health is one. Mental health is even more important. It's absolutely fundamental. There is cracks appearing everywhere. Telford and Wrekin are trying like hell to actually keep the ball floating when all of the partners seem to be disappearing into the woodwork. We've got to drag that out. We've got to make them work. We've actually had the same difficulty when we were working with the county on the joint HOSC. We've now trying to resolve that. And we need a good team there to make sure that we actually ask the questions that matter. We might not be able to change back to where we was, what our own hospital, keep it like it was. But what we have to do is make a difference. We've got to make sure that the people of both Telford and Wrekin and the county have the best possible health service for all, not just one sector.
Thank you. So, seconder? Councillor Kelly-Middleton, thank you. Right, comments, questions? Councillor? Tomlinson?
Oh, you didn't remember that name. I echo what my husband said. It's really disappointing that we haven't done an awful lot of scrutiny. We actually bumped into Steph I'm sure you all remember Steph at Tattingham Park a couple of weeks ago, and she asked how scrutiny was going, and I said, well, it isn't, because that's the way that we feel. You know, when you look back at how much work that we used to do and what we do now, it's quite disappointing, really, because that's what I feel that we are there for, to scrutinise what things are being done by the council. I'm glad that we are going to look at things again and try and get things going. Sadly, I can't make the first meeting that I'm going to do because my mother has an operation that day, but I do think that we really need to look into this in more detail, and I do think that we need more dedicated officers. I do miss Steph. We worked really well. She was a really dedicated officer, and we do need people that can look into these things because we worked damn hard on some of the things we looked at. And I'm just glad that we are going to hopefully get back down that track again. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just remind members that we don't mention officers in our comments?
She's not an officer anymore, though, is she?
Even so, I'm advised that it's not the right thing to do. You are admonished. Right, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Speaker. Just briefly in support of what Derek said, I think it's very important that the scrutiny facility of this council, the operation, works properly. We have a leader and cabinet system. One of the checks and balances, of course, is a proper scrutiny system, and we've been without that for some considerable time. Now, scrutiny isn't there to particularly fight the administration, it's there to agree and be a critical friend. And I think in the past, scrutiny has done that rather well. So I do welcome an undertaking to have a look at scrutiny. It needs funding properly. It has an important role to play. And I think the sooner we can try and get scrutiny back on its feet, because it isn't on its feet at the moment for this authority, then I think the better for the whole council.
Thank you. Councillor Veronica Fletcher. Are you okay?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fully support Councillor, the leader of the Scrutiny Management Board, and also he's also the Scrutiny Chairman of Health and Social Care. And it is vital that those things are scrutinised for the well-being of this community. Unless we get things right at this process, through the process, we will lose all the things that we have put in place in the past, and it is vital that we continue to be the best at scrutiny. And I thank you for listening to me, what I've said. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Derek White, do you wish to respond?
As I said, we've had 6 months where we've been setting things up, working things out, and scrutiny is going to start working. And it will start working this month into next month, and we will work much harder. We have a lot to do. We've got a lot of critical things that we have to deal with and investigate. But as you say, we are the critical friend. This is not about attacking the council. This is about actually making sure, with the minimum, the resources we've got, we do the best we can.
All right, thank you. The recommendations on page 143 to agree the revised scrutiny structure set out in the report and the terms of reference for scrutiny committees attached at Appendix 1. All those in favour, please show. Right, any against? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Right, we now go on to questions, and before we do, I'd like to ask members to try and, well, not to try, but to stay within the time limits prescribed. We've got quite an agenda to get through here, and some of us would like to go, well, Councillor Bentley would like to get home before they kick off, yes? Right. 8 o'clock. We're doing well. It's 7 minutes to 7. So the first one is... Which is the questions? Well, these are the questions, yes. Councillor Ian Fletcher will ask the following question of Councillor David Wright. Do you wish to read out the question? Thank you.
The LGA has recently published the following document: Probity in Planning, Advice for Councillors and Officers Making Planning Decisions. Will the Cabinet Member, Councillor David Wright, Cabinet Member for Housing, Transport and Infrastructure, please advise members whether the advice and recommendations contained within this document will be implemented within Telford and Wrekin Council?
Thank you. Councillor David Wright.
Thank you, Speaker. Can I thank Councillor Fletcher for his question? We have in our mind and our view, a very robust transparent, fair and efficient planning system which firstly produces policies fairly, properly and transparently, and secondly determines planning applications equally, fairly, properly and transparently. We're always looking to improve practices and processes, and we'll look very closely and have been looking closely at what the LGA advises, and we will further consider what changes we can make to make the best use of that report. In particular, I think we should be initially, and we will commit to, looking at inviting ward councillors to comment in particular on pre-application discussions, and looking how we can provide further briefing to ward members on that, on relevant policy issues. It would be good for members involved in planning decisions to potentially undertake annual visits and further site visits to sample sites to look at what's happened when a planning permission has been granted and implemented, and get to see what the impact of their decisions are on the ground. I think that would be a useful development. And we also like the idea of ensuring that the time allowed for public speaking at planning meetings is shared equally between those for and against any application. That's a principle that we do try and implement as best we can. I think it's very important that we enshrine that there are voices on either side and any side within the planning process.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, do you have a supplementary?
I did have a supplementary asking about the practice for councillors on the committee to visit a sample of implemented planning decisions and assess the quality of the decision and the development. I note that the Cabinet member says that that will be considered for implementation, and I look forward to it. And can I suggest the HTA development with the junction at Tees Drive and Prisley Avenue be the first place to look at, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, any comment?
Well, I appreciate Councillor Fletcher's comments. I'm glad that we're running at pace on this one, and that we are going to be doing one of those recommendations in particular. I'm also keen to look at the other elements of the LGA report and make sure that we have a really good, open, transparent planning system within the town. It's very important that we set strategic direction, but that we let members act with their conscience and voting independently in planning committee, and we need to give them the skills, the ability and the information that enables them to do that effectively. And it would be really good if we could get members out more into sites, not just before applications are decided on site visits, but also going to look at what the impact of those decisions has been. It's a matter of joint learning, and I think it's something we should endeavour to adopt.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bentley, you have a question for the leader.
Thank you very much. Does the leader intend to unlock the gridlock of future fit by collaborating constructively with Shropshire Council?
All right, thank you.
Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, this deadlock or gridlock that's been referred to in the question is something that absolutely is not by this council's making. What we have done as a council, often, if not almost always on the health question, actually acted cross-party in unanimous support of our position, has to operate within the system set out by Parliament in regards to reconfiguration of hospital services. And Mr. Speaker, I know that some people don't like it in the county, and some people are often quite vocal in the fact that they don't like the position that this council has adopted. But we will never ever apologise for standing up for healthcare, for our hospital services, for a decent NHS, because that's what our residents expect us to do. Mr. Speaker, we also know that the Future Fit process is now approaching a cost of £500 million. £500 million. And I don't think it's too much to ask, Mr. Speaker. I know this will be referred to later on in the motions, for health bosses and the government to take a second look about how they spend £500 million of taxpayers' money, because the proposal that's in front of the government, which has been accepted by the Health Secretary, pits one community against another. And what we do need, Mr. Speaker, is to come together come together as a Telford Wrekin Council cross-party, to come together with our colleagues at Shropshire Council, with our MPs, and we stand ready, as we have always been in this sense, Mr. Speaker, to work together to get the best healthcare and health outcomes that is possible. Mr. Speaker, the challenge that we set a few years ago to your health bosses and to the government was, don't find the problem, don't find the argument, but find the solution. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue to stand ready to do that. And Mr. Speaker, just finally in regards to this, my offer is to all MPs and to the council, Shropshire Council, in that, and my door is always open, and I will meet them as I will meet the Health Secretary, any place, any time.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bentley, your question was somewhat epigrammatic. Do you have... Epigrammatic, satirical. Yes. Do you have...
Well, I have to say I welcome what Councillor Davies has said and some of his comments recently on local newspapers and on the radio, because for a number of years this side of the chamber have been asking, through motions, questions, for some sort of collaboration, and at the end of the day, it doesn't happen.
So what's the question?
Well, basically, is he changed of viewpoint now due to the election more than they had just recently in the general election?
Not the one in May?
No, not the one in May. No.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, there's no U-turn from this administration or this Labour group in regards to the hospital situation. Our stance is very, very clear. We want to, and we always have done, and our red line is to retain the consultant-led Women's and Children's Unit that was built here 4 years ago at the cost of £28 million. The clinical need for that unit in this town is absolutely clear. I know that many people in this room agree with that. The Health Secretary does not. The Health Secretary has ignored that fact. Mr. Speaker, we also will become the largest town in the whole country without a fully functioning A&E. And again, we have made that point to health bosses and to the Health Secretary time and time again. Mr. Speaker, that has been ignored. Mr. Speaker, we were told that the cost of this reorganisation would be £311 million. As I said earlier, this has now reached £500 million, £500 million. And what we have said, and what I have said in a spirit of cooperation and compromise, is that let's look at a single-site super hospital that can be built fairly and centrally located between Telford and Shrewsbury. That isn't a three-site solution that some members have been arguing for, because, let's face it, Mr. Speaker, the NHS can't afford to run 2 hospital sites, let alone 3, but a single-site super hospital located fairly and centrally between Telford and Shrewsbury. And, Mr. Speaker, that is a compromise. But where is the compromise from the MP for Shrewsbury? Where is the compromise from the government? So the motion later on, I think, fairly worded and argued, that Councillor Burford will propose, sets out that challenge to our local councillors, our local MPs and the government. Let's send a very clear message, Mr. Speaker, that we want the best health outcomes possible, not just for our borough, although that's important, but for the wider Shropshire area. Mr. Speaker, that challenge comes from us. Ultimately, it's not our decision. It's not a decision that we will take. It's the decision of the Health Secretary. But let's work together to change his mind.
Right, thank you. All right, the next question is from Councillor Stephen Bentley to Councillor Ray Evans.
Thank you very much. Does this authority utilise the services of an external contact centre contractor?
The answer is no.
All right, thank you. Any supplementary?
One of the things that I get a lot of complaints about from residents is when they try to contact the council, going through the contact centre, so I do it myself, they find those that answer the phone to be obstructive and unhelpful.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, the question is that something that we instruct them to be?
The answer is no.
No,
Right,
and I
thank you.
believe that the quality of the service provided by our staff is of an excellent standard. Indeed, I recently used it and was very impressed. I would say that our particular approaches to channel shifting have enabled us to deliver improved services. Since 2015, The number of abandoned calls has reduced from 28% to 3% to 8%. The number of call waiting has halved the amount of time, and we're now down to 1 minute and 16 seconds. And again, that was borne out by my own experience. The number of customers coming to Southwater for face-to-face support and advice has decreased by 96%. Overall, I'm very pleased with our channel shifting strategy.
All right, yes, thank you very much. Councillor Bentley, you have a question?
Which one?
Well, the last one from yourself, I do think.
As of the 31st of January, this authority takes responsibility for CPE. Will the Cabinet member consider the introduction of time-restricted parking around our primary and secondary schools?
All right, and CPE is, for those who don't know?
Civil parking enforcement.
Thank you.
If he doesn't know that, it could be the Cabinet member.
No, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the general meeting. Thank you.
It's nice to have that type of speak in this chamber. Thank you, Councillor Bentley, for your question. Over the past 2 years, over £600,000 has been invested into improving road safety outside schools, with projects being designed in conjunction with schools to mitigate the problems they experience. This fund has delivered various safety improvements, with some schemes introducing additional parking restrictions. A number of our schools, both primary and secondary, already have parking restrictions in place, and as of the 31st of January, when we take on our civil parking enforcement powers, we will be actively patrolling schools. Our newly appointed neighbourhood enforcement officers, who will be taking an education-first approach to ensure drivers contravening these restrictions understand the consequences if they continue to park their vehicle on a restricted area. We hope that the driver behaviour will change as a result of CPE, and we will continue to review the need for parking restrictions across the borough. Requests will be reviewed, designed and implemented on a case-by-case basis, and we will work with local communities and schools to understand and treat any ongoing concerns they have. The solutions required for each area may well differ, but may well include time-limited waiting restrictions, as well as measures such as school keep clear markings and designated parking bays. In addition to introducing physical restrictions, we will also continue to deploy our road safety education team to work alongside schools to help to educate our young people to be safe on our roads.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, was the answer to that question yes or no?
That's your question, thank you. Was it yes or no?
I would refer to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Thank you very much. All right. Question 5, Councillor Doug Moore. Question, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Would the administration explain how a reduction in school transport provision contributes to addressing the acknowledged climate change crisis?
Okay, and that's Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Councillor Dugmore. The Council is in consultation with residents of the borough about the ways in which travel assistance will be provided. Our focus is around increasing independence and so, where possible, focusing on increased support of our independent training travel offer for children and young people. This will enable them to use public transport or be safe when walking independently, or cycling to school where possible, thus encouraging young people to be active and to have a more healthy lifestyle. We understand that the public bus routes are not always available across the borough, but we are working with Arriva to see how we can make travel in the borough more sustainable, both from an environmental and a financial point of view. For those areas of the borough that are not serviced by a public bus route, we will work with providers to encourage the use of ultra-low emission vehicles, and where that is not possible, the vehicles that at least meet the latest vehicle emission standards. The Council's policy in terms of admission is to provide local schools for local children, ensuring that children do not have unnecessarily long journeys to school. For the majority of our pupils, a place at a local school is available within walking distance. Our school organisation and catchment areas are therefore reviewed regularly to ensure this can happen. Parents may opt for a school at a school that is not their nearest, but it is their responsibility to transport their children in those circumstances.
Thank you. Mr. Dugmore, do you have a supplementary?
Are there any plans in place to increase school transport funding?
Thank you.
We'll give you a written answer to that one.
Right, written answer will be...
Until we've got the end of the consultation, we're not able to answer anything. As Councillor Degmore should be well aware, the consultation is live at the moment.
Okay, the consultation is live. You'll get a written answer when they're able to give one. Right, thank you. Councillor Eric Carter, question for Councillor Carolyn Healy.
It's not just for Councillor Carolyn Healy. Could I ask, as Chair of the Marcher Strategic Rail Group, ask both the Cabinet Member for Visitor Economy, which is Carolyn, and the World Heritage Site, and also the Cabinet Member for Housing, Transport and Infrastructure, which is David Wright, whether they agree with me that the plans to restore rail connectivity to the Ironbridge Power Station site provide opportunity to offer the means of transporting the 2 million plus tonnes of waste safely from the site rather than by road, followed by the fantastic plans to reintroduce passenger services back to the main line, as well as working with heritage line operators to help the visitor economy. This is in addition to providing a park and ride facility on site.
Right, can I just clarify, Councillor Carter, that was question 6, not question 7 as well?
No, it's question 6.
No, it was when you mentioned Councillor David Wright. It confused me. So this is Councillor Carolyn Healy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Carter. I can answer on behalf of myself and Councillor Wright. I have long been of the view that passenger rail links should be a key element of the proposals to develop the former power station site, together with the line being used for the removal of materials from the site. To that end, members and officers continue to work with representatives from Harworth Group, Network Rail, Midlands Connect, Shropshire Council and potential future operators to assess the future of the rail line between the main line near Stafford Park and the power station. The line is still owned by Network Rail, who do accept the existing freight use of the line. There's a recognition of the need to facilitate freight movements on this line to clear the site of the pulverised fuel ash and to enable the mineral extraction in order to limit the vehicle movements onto the highway network, which we do believe would have an adverse impact on the network within our borough. Initial work on this project has involved Network Rail assessing the work required to enable use of the line for freight, and in particular works needed to the important structures on the line, such as the Albert Edward Bridge, which is a listed structure, but also the unlisted, but no less important, Corbrookdale Viaduct. The work is ongoing and we're anticipating more information from Network Rail in the near future. With regard to future operations beyond freight, the authority is committed to growing sustainable transport modes in the borough, with both the proposed rail facility, the park and ride site that's proposed. We are fully supportive of measures to reduce the impact of vehicular traffic within the World Heritage Site, as well as supporting the destination offer. And all of this is linked into the adopted World Heritage Site Management Plan that seeks to develop the World Heritage Site into a pre-eminent green environmental tourist destination.
Right, thank you. Councillor David Wright, you're mentioned in this. Do you wish to add?
No, Mr Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, supplementary, please.
Yes, could I take the opportunity of thanking the Cabinet Member for her response, which is welcomed. It is a very, very important, in fact, it's probably the most important transport movements that's going to take place over coming years, with a site of 350 acres, and what this can add to the World Heritage Site in terms of visitor numbers and so on from across the country. Just one question, if I might just ask. In light of what's happened in recent times, and you take this opportunity to welcome the new Chief Executive, David Sidaway, in the fact that the Marcher Strategic Rail Group, which I says I chair, over recent months, the decision was taken not to supply officers to come to that meeting, and we now have Cabinet members from Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin, David Wright, who comes there, but we do not have officer representation after having that for many, many years. And I would ask, would it be possible through the Cabinet members to seek officer attention on that and to come to the next meeting, which is now going to be scheduled for the 21st of February? Thank you.
Do you want to answer or do you want to defer and consider?
Well, can I just say, Mr Speaker, that falls outside of the remit of the question as far as I can see, but that's part of your ruling. Clearly, I'm happy to discuss this matter with the Leader and the Chief Executive over the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Discussion and defer. Councillor Carter, you have a final question this evening?
Thank you. This is the end for Councillor Wright. Could I ask the Cabinet Member for Housing, Transport and Infrastructure if he would help to ensure that as work takes place on the Nye Park I don't like saying that really, it's the Newport Innovation Park, but I know it's been asked to call the Nye Park, off the A518 in Newport, that a footpath and cycle track be provided on the north side of the road between the Sheep Island and Aldi to enable a safe and quick access to the retail park, which is nearing completion, for residents of Station Road and others.
Thank you. Councillor Wrekin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Delivery of a footpath and cycle link to the north of the A518 is dependent on partnerships with private landowners, and we aim to ensure that this comes forward as part of phase 2 of the highway improvement works and as they are delivered. We're very proud of the Nye Park development and the partnership we've generated with the LEP, Harper Adams and other players. We think it's a major step forward for the borough economy and also sustaining jobs and investment in the Newport area. Phase 2 includes an additional dual carriageway section on the A518, a proposed new roundabout to access the Station Road East development, and also improvements to the Station Road known as the Sheep Roundabout, as well as the footpath cycle link from the Sheep Island.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want to come back?
Just to make a follow, if I may, could I thank the Cabinet member for that? As Chair for a number of years of the Regeneration Partnership, it's been my pleasure, along with colleagues, to have been chasing up something for employment for the Newport area. We've had a lot of housing, but not so much employment, and it's great to see this Nye Park coming forward with the 900 proposed jobs and obviously the retail park close by. So I do welcome that. I would just add that it would be very, very useful to get some time scale on when this might happen, because what worries me is that this might get put back and we'd have the road.
Right, thank you very much.
Mr Speaker, we will look at the phasing for Councillor Carter. Could I just say that this is a Labour Council that's delivering Nye Park, with investment that we've secured from the LEP and investment that we've pump primed, and I understand the opposition voted against. So we are very much committed to delivering this project, and we're committed to delivering investment in the Newport area. We will phase this project and ensure that we can deliver the highway, footpath and cycle improvements, and will facilitate access to the site, which will deliver hundreds of new jobs for people right across this borough.
Okay, that is the end. No, that is the end of that matter. No, the standing orders are question, answer, supplementary, answer. We will now move on. We will now move on. Councillor, he's taken your time, Councillor Eade. You wish to move a motion? And again, can I remind all members to stick to the time limits, otherwise we'll be here long after kick-off. Councillor Bentley.
Right, thank you, Speaker. In presenting this motion, I will try to avoid straying into some of the territory of the administration's motion on Future Fit, parts of which I both agree and disagree with. It seems very clear to me that the outlined business case for Future Fit is in tatters, and that the agreed allocation of £312 million is now no longer sufficient to deliver the existing hospital transformation programme that we need for Shropshire. Where this sad state of affairs leaves the credibility of the two CCGs and SAF leadership is another question altogether, and one on which I'm sure that we all here would take a similar view. After more than 6 years and the expenditure of several £1 million, which could have been spent on health services, we seem to be no further forward than we ever were, and I believe that Future Fit itself, as I said, actually lies in tatters at the moment. In Northumbria, a county similar in size to Shropshire and Powys, but with 3 existing general hospitals rather than 2, built a modern, cutting-edge hospital located in the middle of them all at Cramlington. Because of the new technology, cutting-edge practices, plus its reputation, Sir Bruce Keogh, then the head of the NHS, described Cramlington as having seen the future. During a fact-finding visit to Cramlington over 2 years ago, with Wrekin MP Mark Pritchard, Councillor Doug Moore, and the former PRH CEO David Sambach, we were told that before the project started, All local MPs, politicians, local authorities and clinicians all agreed on the way forward, and that was very critical in getting the project underway. This vital goal has proved somewhat elusive locally, which is why I welcome the restated comments by Shropshire Council's leader, Peter Nutting, about the provision of a new hospital between Telford and Shrewsbury, following the lead given on this option by Telford's MP, Lucy Allen. What I welcome even more are the reported comments by Councillor Davies here at Telford and Wrekin, who recently stated in the Shropshire Star that he's in favour of a hospital, as he stated here tonight quite clearly, to be centrally located between Telford and Shrewsbury, and that we should unite to lobby for that project to go ahead. Councillor Davies also rightly stated that one hospital is what we need, and that he stands ready to lobby with MPs and Peter Nutting to get this hospital built, settling the issue, and I quote, for generations to come. I think that's very laudable, and I believe Sean to be right in his comments and welcome his recognition and support for what would be a sound clinical outcome for the communities in both Telford and further beyond. The lessons of Northumbria are there for all to see, but for us to achieve such an outcome, we do require a broad and cohesive base of support for effective, concerted and concentrated lobbying to deliver such an outcome in perhaps the window of opportunity we have at the moment. The considerable campaigning work already done and still ongoing by both Wrekin MP Mark Pritchard and Telford MP Lucy Allen should be both applauded and supported by this council. All of us, and I mean all of us, should be working together towards a common goal. However, as I've already said, for whatever reason or reasons, that goal has not proved possible, and the reasons for that I don't believe are worth dwelling upon at the moment. But now, building on the comments and stated desires of Councillor Davies, we have a real opportunity to work hand in glove, and even at this late stage, perhaps secure the right outcome for Telford and Wrekin. However, it's not just the clinical provision in Northumbria which we should be considering in isolation. Equally as important is that Northumbria has seen the integration of social care with the NHS, again something that is also vital for us to achieve here in Shropshire. And I think we're some way away from doing that, although working with the local NHS has improved somewhat to what it used to be. To those ends, I passionately believe that a full delegation to see firsthand the work being done and what has been achieved at Cramlington is essential to help us form our views and a way forward here in Telford. Now, I've listened very carefully to what's been said about joint working and working together, and we do need to do that. It's easy to say, it's perhaps become more difficult than it would otherwise be to actually achieve. But I think there's a real desire here across the council, and it is a real offer, a genuine offer, that we do work together on this to try and deliver the right sort of outcome. But I do believe that the council should be focusing, setting its targets and then trying to deliver that. Thank you, Speaker.
Right, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Dugmore. Councillor Dugmore. Okay, thank you. Other councillors? Councillor Derek White first.
I remind members of the joint HOSC that they should not participate in this or the following motion.
Oh, is that members of the HOSC? Yes. Is that's noted, yes? Right, thank you. Councillor Burford.
I'm going to reserve my fire for our motion, but I do want to say this about the motion we've just heard. I agree with a lot of the sentiments that Councillor Reid expresses about Future Fit. My problem with this is that I think strategically it is better in approaching this with a spirit of unity that we do not nail our colours to a particular solution. I'd remind Councillor Reid that Peter Nutting's comment, which was picked up by the leader, was about a super hospital with all services on one site. This proposal is about an A&E only, a critical care facility only. So the two ideas are different. We are arguing that we need to look at all conceivable options. There is at the moment no willingness from the Secretary of State, the local NHS or NHS England to look at alternatives. We need to be open-handed about this and say, yes, we will look at every conceivable alternative. I don't dismiss the possibility of the visit that this motion talks about, but first of all, we would need the agreement round the table of all parties to look sensibly at all the options. That's what we're aiming at. Rather than to go full steam ahead with a specific solution. We need an alternative, and I will return to that when I speak to our motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other comments, questions, comments? No? Councillor Dugmore. Oh, I didn't see you. Councillor Tomlin, sorry.
I welcome this motion from the Conservative group. Welcome the motion from the Labour group. But what the general public must be thinking out there is, why do they have to both put two separate motions? We've unanimously agreed tonight on the minutes from the previous meeting. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have had the gumption, that's a technical word, between when these were all being put together, for all major political parties to got round the table and thrashed out one single motion that we can unify behind, rather than having the discussions in this chamber always about the differences. It is sad. You would hope, once the main elections are out of the way and we haven't got a sabre rattle and try and create points of difference for the general public to say, oh, they're better than them, oh, they're better than them. We should be grown up. Now, I know that people passionately agree about certain schemes, and I fully appreciate that. And they may have genuine differences of opinion which aren't simply of a political nature, and I fully appreciate that. I will wholeheartedly support this motion if it wasn't for the fact it's repeated later on in the second motion, which gives us other options. So I'm disappointed with the political process that's gone on at this council, really, again. I understand how much it means to everybody in this chamber, but I think our group will be abstaining on this motion so we can fully support and keep all the options open on the second motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Dugmore, did you wish to exercise your right to reply? Your second.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I just point out the motion only mentions a new hospital. It does not mention anything about a critical care hospital. It does say to go to a critical care hospital and have a look at that option, but no, it is all about a new hospital of which we're all agreed, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever why it wouldn't be supported by everybody. I urge all members to support it. This motion was only brought about by the comments made by the leader of the council, who publicly backed this proposal, and which is something that we've supported for a very long time. To be honest, I thought the chances of getting new hospital facilities between Shrewsbury and Telford were gone. Yet the Telford and Wrekin leader's comments and the support of the Shropshire Council leader presents an opportunity to get the decision makers to overturn and to deliver this superior health service, which this model actually is proven to deliver, even at a reduced cost. To grasp this opportunity, though, we need to have unanimity of purpose, with all sides, regardless of political views, uniting behind this initiative. It really is the last chance. Mr. Speaker, members should beware of clinging to the dream of two fully operational A&E departments. It will not happen. They're too close together and incompatible with the way in which A&E cover is being provided across the country. Hence the difficulty in recruiting staff, ending up with a series of short-term fixes. Even overseas staff that come to work here want to broaden their professional expertise so they don't stay for any length of time. So we just have to accept that that's the way it is now. any attempts to amend any of this proposal would just give ammunition to those who want Future Fit to go ahead. Remember, divide and conquer. The dilution of the support for the third way will be seen a reduction in commitment. Only by being united in purpose will the idea have any chance of success. Many of you will know that David Sambach, he's not medically illiterate at all, and he says he hopes that we'll all come together and actually put aside these political rivalries and just get on with it, because this guy knows his stuff. I plead with everybody just to back the motion so that united we can go ahead with the strongest possible case. If we don't, then it's certain that the Future Fit proposal will just go ahead as planned with all its implications. So, is that what we really want? No, it's not. You need to support this motion because it says everything and we're all in agreement of it. We know that we're all in agreement, so why don't we all back it?
Right, thank you. Right, are there any other contributions before I invite Councillor Eade to respond? No, Councillor Eade, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Speaker. Well, am I surprised at one or two of the comments? Well, yeah, I think I probably am. Am I disappointed in those as well? Yeah, I think there is a certain amount of disappointment on what's been said. If I can deal with some of the comments. First of all, Bill, we put the motion in quite early. We had no idea that a second motion would follow. In fact, the reason we put it in, based on the comments that Sean had made publicly, we genuinely thought that this was a way forward and it was a motion that would unite the whole council. That's why we did it. And I repeat, we had no idea that a second motion would come in quite late in the day. Andy, we are talking about a fully functioning hospital here. Cramlington has actually changed since that visit we made 2 years ago, and is now quite different to what it was at that time. And I think it is well worth doing that. And I welcome your comments about not ruling out going to visit the hospital. I think we should do more than that, not rule it out. I think we should actually resolve to do that and go and see exactly what's going on there, what the difficulties are, what the successes are, what the failures are, what the challenges are, because I think that will help formulate our own views around this. If we go down the road of keeping our options open, as you say, I think that is just going to extend the process. If they were to accept that, repeated feasibility studies is like kicking the can down the road. They've already done that to a certain extent. I honestly think now is the time that we do pin our colours to the mast, that we decide that what we want to do, what we want to achieve. There is a model there that we can certainly look at, and let's go for it. I think there is a fairness and an equity in supplying a hospital in between Telford and Shrewsbury. And depending on where that is positioned, it could be a lot easier to get to. Off the M54, it will have motorway links, effectively rail links, than the PRH is at the moment. And certainly some of the developments that we're facing around the PRH is actually going to strangle that site as regards getting emergency vehicles on and off. So I do ask you to support this. It's not conditional on supporting the other motion that comes later. But support this, and let's actually have a look at this, and let's follow up what the comments that Sean has made, and do this together. We're willing, as I said, more than willing. We want to work together on this. Thank you, Speaker.
Right, thank you. All right, I now put the motion to Council. All those in favour, please show. All right, I'll start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11. Do you make it 11? 12. Okay, 12 in favour. All those against? That's obviously overwhelming. It's opposed, and of course there are abstentions. Okay. Do you need a count, or is that sufficient? No. That motion is lost. Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Nigel Dugmore to move his motion, and then Councillor Tim Nelson to second it, and then we will introduce the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the local plan is to help sustain and enhance the quality of Telford and Wrekin and the quality of life for those who live and work and visit the borough. I apologise if it's poor English, but it's a direct quote out of the local plan. It goes on further to say it's a vision that includes the provision of sufficient homes of the right type and quality in the right places to meet a growing and ageing population. The number of houses required and their location is fundamental to the local plan and the basis for the other criteria for decision making for other elements included. If we have too few houses, then this will stifle the economy of the borough. Employees will go elsewhere due to lack of workforce, shops and high streets will suffer due to lack of business, and we will see a decline in the number of economically active residents. Conversely, too many houses will lead to a slowdown in the build rate as the houses will not sell, a strain on infrastructure such as schools, medical facilities, etc., and an increase in economically inactive residents from authorities that have a housing shortage. So a balance is needed when planning for employment sites, schools, medical facilities, transport, retail and the other elements that contribute to the infrastructure of our society. The number of people we are planning to cater for is the first question asked. The population growth estimates are based on the number of people that live in the borough, and these estimates are based on the housing growth. So, chicken and egg, really. The current local plan runs from 2011 to 2031, so we're approaching the halfway point when this review is complete. Therefore, the statistics upon which the plan was based were considered nearly 10 years ago. And this was even when Brexit was just a twinkle in Farage's eye, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I'm fully supportive of this review and hope that the criticisms that the planning inspector made, or the comments that he made when he reviewed it the first time, will be fully taken on board. By 2031, when this plan expires, we will have housing numbers based on data over 20 years old. Therefore, it's essential that housing numbers are considered. I welcome the amendment that's been put forward, which clarifies that housing numbers will be included in the review, as it wasn't clear at when the review was discussed at the Cabinet meeting referred to.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Tim Nelson. The fact that he welcomes it.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The fact that he welcomes it. Does that curtail anything, or do we just formally do it? No. Okay. All right. As you see, we have an amendment. I was just checking the fact that the Speaker to the motion welcomed it. I wondered if that would curtail anything, but no, we have to follow the process. So, Councillor David Wright.
Mr. Speaker, I move the amendment, and I welcome the tone, really, of the introductory speech by Councillor Dugmore. I think this is an opportunity for us to review the local plan as part of the process outlined by the Cabinet. And this amendment really, in my name and that of Councillor Overton, seeks to clarify the situation in relation to that process. It's crucially important, as I said earlier in my early remarks to questions, that this is seen as a review of the local plan and not a tearing up of the local plan and a rewriting of it. If that is the case, the inspector will throw out our activity. It will cost us millions of pounds and will be open up to speculative development. So it's crucially important that we stay within the bounds of the review. The overall review is proposed to be underpinned by four objectives. Employment-led growth through investment and job creation, a forest community approach which affords protection, enhancement and accessibility of the natural environment and green spaces that characterises the borough, support for the regeneration of our borough towns, our new towns estates and our infrastructure, and fourthly, focusing on housing to meet local needs, including providing more affordable and specialist accommodation to support people to live longer and happier lives within the borough in housing that's suitable to their needs. So the review will not be housing-led, but it will consider housing as a component within that review. So this amendment provides the clarity that we need to ensure that the inspector doesn't see this as an open-ended commitment to tearing up and rewriting the local plan, and it ensures that we consider the review in the context of the Cabinet report that was considered on the 2nd of January 2020, and in that context I move the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all know that the local plan has to go through a defined process. This is to keep us within the legislation and to not open us up to challenge. The government, with their desire to see more opportunities for developers, have made local authorities the leaders of the process and also the ones open to challenge, like being responsible for providing a 5-year land supply, which is an ever-moving feast. This means we have to make sure the process is unchallengeable and one that does not open the door to speculative development. The process outlined in the Cabinet report is the correct one for the Council, and therefore I second the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson, yes, you've indicated you want to speak. Can I just remind you, you're technically speaking to the amendment? Not, well, I thought you might think you were exercising your right.
No, on the contrary,
Okay.
I'd quite like to speak in favour of the amendment. The amendment is exactly the same words as our motion. It has a preamble, which is the detail. We're very likely to vote on the amendment. We're very likely to vote in favour of the amendment because it's being proposed by the other side, and it will become the substantive motion. So I wanted to speak because my words are exactly the same.
Okay, thank you.
Have I started, or are we just made some introduction, Mr. Speaker?
I just thought you were expressing your support for the amendment.
Well, I will through a speech, but the clock's ticking.
It is.
Yeah, could it unclick, please, because we haven't started my speech. So.
What do you reckon? Yeah, well, with the unanimity, I think we should move to the vote on the amendment. Yeah? Shall we do that? All right. Okay, all those in favour of the amendment, please show. That's agreed. That then becomes a substantive motion. Do I take further debate?
Yeah.
Yes, further debate. It's now the substantive motion. Yes, people. Please do.
How does one speak to the original conception of the motion?
I was taking the feeling from the meeting and the comments from Councillor Nelson in particular, and it appeared to me the mover, the seconder, supported the amendment, therefore it seemed logical to move to step forward. Now you can speak to the...
May I make the remark, Mr. Speaker, that's stymied the free expression of a councillor to retort to what is being placed on this paper with regards to Councillor Dudlaw and that particular remarks of the motion.
Please speak.
How do I do it?
Now, substantive motion now, we're doing to discuss it.
I wish to support, Mr. Speaker, the motion that was placed in the first instance on this document.
And those words are contained in the amendment, so please do.
Therefore, I will speak to those particular words then.
Shall we start the clock? Thank you.
In normal council words, Mr. Speaker, I wish to support this motion and ask for a greater inquiry and scrutiny. There are a number of issues that must be addressed and which are given cause regularly to the existing residents of this borough, towards whom the council has initial responsibility. Telford is growing rapidly with housing numbers at a record high. We see buildings mushrooming overnight by bringing pressure to bear on schools, social services, general practices, and as we are all too aware, Princess Ward Hospital and NHS. The great number of new builders undoubtedly put pressure upon the utility services and associated infrastructure. It's been reported that Telford could become a forest community. We know the benefit of nature for our general well-being. However, acres of wild space, shrub and woodland, together with the associated wildlife, has already been decimated and green fields, sites and playing fields lost to tightly packed housing schemes. Therefore, recommend that the local plan is reviewed with greater focus upon the needs of the existing residents, rather than the pursuing spatial awareness targets. Mr. Speaker, On a personal note, sir, I myself have experienced on more than one occasion the trauma of having raw sewage flooding into my property. Sewage discharged from an overused drainage system which is now earmarked to service a further large development which is designated on original green belt land. In conclusion, I would like to offer my thanks to Councillor Clarence for her efforts on Alston's residents' behalf. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hoskin. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Veronica Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the mid-2000s, I was appointed with another member by the Council to West Midlands Consultative Committee, where we were presented with government housing quotas for each authority, which was open for discussion by the membership from businesses, local authorities and many other people. My principles then, and I hold them now, that it is vital that when considering the number of new build, not only should we select the sites and that be taken into account, but that we should take into account infrastructure, and that is in place at the same time as building new homes. The communities must be sustainable, and people rely on school places, GP surgeries, pharmacies, shops, all sorts of things, green network, reliable bus services and open spaces, recreation and so much more. It is important at the time to maintain the ecology of the area and to take into account climate change by putting in place solar panels, photovoltaic tiles, grey water recycling and all other measures which will sustain homes for the future and our communities. How we want our borough to look for the future, that is making sure employment is, in various forms is accessible locally, building a skilled, strong workforce for the future so that we do not lose our young people when they leave full-time education. We know when planning permission is granted for large development, it is phased and comes to a halt for many years to come in some instances. One in particular in my ward, which is off Redhill Way. It has limited facilities and no bus service, and everyone is reliant on the car. The whole ward is due to double in size within the next 10 years. Strategic, sustainable planning is vital to combat all problems of the 21st century we face. It is all very well building more and more homes, but where is the quality of life if we do not have in place the things that people can enjoy and have the breathing spaces for their health and well-being? The needs for the people as they grow older and like the area where they live, where are they to live then in the future? Where is the space for expansion for the future generations, where the families who now live here? Where is the land to come from if we use it all now? We need to look again at the local plan and review it and put in place a strategic, sustainable plan for the future as the borough is expanding exponentially and implement measures to combat climate change.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My simple point is that is a question really to Councillor David Wright. Lots of talk is often said about the local plan in terms of housing numbers, and I've had this in all sorts of literature. But could he clarify for us, so we can put it on public record, that in principle the total quantity of houses that are required for a local authority to incorporate within its local plan is given to this local authority by the government, by its regional bodies? Is it therefore, as a general principle, the total number of houses that we have to build and make plans for comes from the government? Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, and there's two points of view on that, but isn't that the general principle? Isn't it simply primarily the local authority's responsibility to decide where those houses are placed? Thank you.
All right, thanks. Right, thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Tim Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hope it's not too late to wish you Happy New Year, sir, and members.
Very kind.
Let us hope this year we can find common ground and accord. We all want the best for the borough. The Council are required to review the local plan, and I'm encouraged that the Council will consider employment-led growth, the accessibility of green space, Borough Town's regeneration and infrastructure, and specialist through-life accommodation. There will be a refreshed transport plan and a new housing strategy. The amendment requests that the Council reviews housing numbers to support the new housing strategy. I did not know how you could have a housing strategy without including and reviewing the number of houses, so I welcome the amendment. Analysis of the strategic housing land supply completions from 2011 to 2017 of approximately 4,500 and the Council's own number of 1,000 completions per year since then and projected suggests the Council will overshoot its objective of 17,281 houses to 2031 by around 1,000 houses. This might or might not be desirable. It should be reviewed. The Cabinet members indicated to me informally not reviewed downwards, but we should also consider strongly whether we exceed that figure. I listened to Councillor David Wright's submission earlier and welcome that. What I would note is that the amendment appears to be a change of tone from Cabinet, and that is a welcome change of tone. There is legitimate concern about the scale, location and pace of development in Telford. The A518 and A41 are getting jammed. The M54 is getting jammed. You will be aware of resident concern about the size of the development. Now there are going to be more houses. I have real concerns about drainage, and I'm not sure what has been done about it. Drainage is but one area of genuine and practical concern, but it could be school places or doctor surgeries. Members, you will have worked out the words I've just used about resident concern are not mine. Many thanks, Councillor Angela McClements. They're yours. Please listen to her. Please consider housing numbers in the local plan review and support this amendment. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Eade.
Thank you. Just one quick question, if I can, to David, or at least just to make a point on this. In days of yore, if there was a technicality with a motion like this, we would be advised of that, and rather than go through the rigmarole of doing an amendment, we could have simply altered the motion to suit. It was something that was always done, always has been done, but seems to have been lost over the past couple of years or so. In response to what Bill said around figures, they were provided by the government, you're right. They're now provided by the ONS, as I understand it. And I think it's only right and proper that this council does challenge those figures to see, based on need, what houses do we need to supply. The other important thing in this, of course, is infrastructure. And I'm sure we're all picking up all sorts of complaints about traffic on the road, appointments at doctors' surgeries, which are getting ever longer. There are real problems around this. And if we're building houses for houses' sake, for financial reasons or other, we really need to step back and take a proper look. Now, I do welcome the change in tone from what was said at Cabinet, and I look forward to a proper and full review of the local plan by this authority.
Right, thank you. Councillor Overton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The thing with the local plan, having been through it is led by employment and growth. That the number of houses is led by that. So it's quite clear that the plan has to match up what employment land that comes forward and the growth of the town. What amazes me is we still have this talk about housing numbers when the Conservative administration in Telford Wrekin, during maybe the meeting Veronica went to, the regional spatial strategy signed up to 27,000 houses to be built in this town, and we as an administration, when we reviewed the local plan, said we brought it down to 16,000. The biggest issue in planning is the government. It is the government country by investing in our health service and not bringing us all these years of austerity. And so blaming house builders is not right, because house builders, when they do put planning applications together, do fund through 106 agreements extra school places, extra play facilities. But what we must remember is this administration all the time tried to bring the houses numbers down from the Conservative administration numbers, and sadly we have planning applications overturned by the government through the planning inspector that then puts more into this town. We have plan applications overturned that for friends of developers through this government, where people in Wellington didn't want Haygate Fields, but the planning inspector overturned that, and more housing is put into this town. And that's why we need a good local plan, one that makes this town fair for everybody who lives here, and that is why this administration has invested in more local nature reserves, green guarantee sites to protect green areas, and the forestry idea is great in bringing this into the local plan. So I'm not taking any lessons from the Conservatives over housing numbers unless they start lobbying their own government to start reviewing their planning policy nationally.
Thank you. Councillor David Wright.
Can I just say how strongly I support that speech by Councillor Overton? I'm a bit puzzled by Councillor Reid's remarks about a change of tone from the Cabinet meeting. I've not said anything tonight that I didn't say at the Cabinet meeting. In fact, I've used the same notes that I used in my speech from the Cabinet meeting. This amended motion clearly lays out how a review of the planning process needs to take place. It needs to look at all components. It needs to look at employment land. It needs to look at infrastructure. It needs to look at green space, the forest community idea. It also needs to look at how suitable our housing supply is for people who live within our local area. Fundamentally, yes, government sets out its planning objectives, it decides what scale of development needs to take place, and it asks local authorities to prepare plans in accordance with those regionally set guidelines. We've worked really hard to ensure that we carefully plan our housing development activity alongside developers, so we do try and plan in activity that brings forward associated infrastructure. And that's difficult at times because one of the two things that Councillor Veronica Fletcher has said are quite right. Very often developers put the infrastructure elements to the back end of the programme, and one of the things we'd like to do is try and ensure that through phasing developers deliver some of the infrastructure up front, and that's really crucially important to us as a community. This amended motion falls within the legal requirements and guidelines that we have to pursue in order to make this review a success. If we open it too wide, as I've said earlier tonight, they will consider that we have ripped up our local plan. Let me make it very clear. The local plan stands, the housing target within the local plan stands. Developers should operate within those bounds. We will not be looking at additional housing development and speculative development in this borough. We will bat it away on the basis of our strong and effective local plan. We are carrying out a review. I'd say to developers, this is not an open book for you to come forward with applications on land that we don't consider appropriate. The local plan stands. We have our housing targets. We'll consider applications on that basis, and we hope the inspector would respect that too. I am supportive of the fact that people have generally been positive in this debate. I think many of us right across the chamber are on the same sheet on this. We'd like to make development successful, but it's really important that we protect ourselves against speculative development that we think is inappropriate. This motion and the Cabinet review that I proposed on the 2nd of January, that Cabinet supported and that Council has supported tonight, enables us to do that in a structured way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there anybody else before I call upon Councillor Dugmore for the right to reply? Right. Councillor Dugmore, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
Oh.
Councillor Davis, please.
Blimey, somebody's rattled some cages. Good grief, we're only supporting the review. But we face many challenges in the near future, especially regarding climate change. And as as a local authority, we need to respond to these challenges. How can we plan, for example, electric charging points if we don't know where they're needed? How can we plan where the infrastructure, as has been pointed out in the debate, such as transport, schools, doctors' surgeries, retail developments, etc., are to go if we don't have a fully reviewed plan? Without all elements being considered, we will end up with infrastructure either being in the wrong place or not delivered at all. Of special mention is development in the rural areas. Villages like Tiverton have been hit hard as a designated village for expansion, yet the potholes are still ignored and the bus services remain inadequate. Without a review of housing numbers and locations, such settlements will continue to be changed beyond recognition and will become ever more difficult with which to live. Members, I urge you to support this amended motion. You know, it's not apportioning blame, and you know, that's not the idea behind it. We just wanted to make sure that housing numbers were actually going to be included in the review, which has now been included in the amended in the amended motion, because it's absolutely essential that we get this right, or we'll have to live with the consequences in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. Right, all those in favour of the motion as amended, please show. And that appears to be unanimous. Right, thank you. Right, we now have another potentially lengthy motion. Do you wish, I take the sounding of the meeting, do you wish for a 5-minute recess? The people, no? Okay, fine, I'll hold myself.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Councillor Fletcher.
Earlier in this evening, this council defeated a motion which calls to support the provision of a new hospital in between Telford and Shrewsbury. This motion we now have before us does contain a suggestion, a request for a rapid feasibility study to include the option of a new site for a hospital between Telford and Wrekin and Shropshire. Therefore, I would feel that this motion would fail under 8(11) of the Constitution, that is substantially similar to a motion we turned down half an hour ago. Therefore, I think we cannot discuss it for at least 6 months.
Then I will take advice from our legal officer. No, but I'll be seen to... He's gone. The motion
for this one talks about, supports all of this stuff, but actually the undertaking is to send a fact-finding report.
Oh, right, yeah.
So this one doesn't talk about fact-finding, it talks about
okay.
the
Right.
It's different.
Thank you for that. I'm advised that the earlier motion talks about a fact-finding mission in particular, and this motion does not. Therefore, this motion is different and it will go ahead. That is my ruling. Thank you. No, come on, let's keep the spirit nice and... Yes. Right, Councillor Burford will propose the motion. Thank you. It's quite a lengthy motion, so he'll speak to it rather than read it out. Thank you.
You don't need
You're going to read it out.
Do you want me to?
No.
No? Okay, that's fine. Good.
All right.
Everybody can read the motion. So, this motion is an attempt to build a coalition of those who are opposed to, or at least have doubts about the current approach to reorganising hospital services in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. Whilst we continue to hold to the position we've taken in numerous previous motions, we are now witnessing trends that demand a rethink beyond just the unfairness and detriment of these proposals to our borough. These trends are, and you'll be aware of them I'm sure, reflected in the latest demographic projections for the number of older people in the borough and the numbers suffering from dementia. A dramatic and frankly frightening increase in the numbers going to A&E. In October, the Hospital Trust Board reported that there had been a 20% increase at PRH in just 4 months, which was close to the level anticipated over the next 7 years, right? 4 months in 7 years, when they did the modelling work for Future Fit in 2017. This modelling work has never been revised. Even more significantly, this was coupled with an increase in emergency admissions, higher than any time over the last 5 years. So it wasn't just that people were turning up at A&E unnecessarily. Thirdly, a worrying increase in waits over 4 hours and trolley waits, the worst in the country, because of shortage of staff and beds, with staff working under intolerable pressure, working heroically, I might say, to keep that service going. And fourthly, with a system-wide funding crisis already a fact and further cuts to many services inevitable, a breathtaking increase in the cost of Future Fit to at least £500 million, and we think it's going higher than that. 60% over the 312 million that remained the figure even as recently as November, before the leaked document came to light. They must have known, and they didn't tell us. Most of this money is going into the crumbling infrastructure of the RSH. By the way, if the local NHS were to get a loan of 498 million, the repayment costs would also increase from 10.9 million to 17.4 million. More drain on the services that we provide. Future Fit is still making the assumption that the system must and will transform itself so that these trends are dealt with or become less of an issue. In the case of the little financial problem, they think they can phase what is planned. My experience of projects that are phased because of insufficient money is that later phases never get done. Guess which hospital is furthest down the phasing list? The PRH. So where is the significant investment needed to transform the system that they talk about? Even without large amounts of additional cash, we have excellent examples of initiatives that are working here in Telford and Wrekin in partnership with our NHS colleagues. For example, our discharge team at the PRH are top performers despite a 25% increase in people with complex needs leaving hospital in the last 12 months. A programme called Pathway Zero gets some patients home with family and community support only, and is having an increasing impact, but so much more could be done with more resources. Our newly introduced integrated rapid response team, which aims to avoid people needing admission, involves our social workers, nurses, OTs, clinicians and ambulance staff, and is already paying off, but needs additional staffing, for example, paramedics. At an earlier preventative level in the process, our initiatives around health and well-being in the community and our work to harness the goodwill and voluntary effort that is there needs resources to upscale to a level that will make the impact we know it can make. Our work is forming an integrated partnership with the voluntary sector and the NHS is also important. There are other undeveloped ways forward too, including digital transformation and initiatives such as Hospital at Home that are working successfully elsewhere. Any reorganisation of health services needs to not just pay lip service to this kind of work, but to resource it so it can bring about change at scale. This motion then is first and foremost reaching out to our opposition colleagues, our MPs and our neighbouring council so that we can jointly make a call to the NHS for a radical rethink of its priorities in line, as it happens, with their own 10-year plan. It is not about arguing for one particular solution. Solutions need to be costed and agreed between all the parties involved in this, including the MPs who have shifted position. It is about a joint effort by all of us who serve this borough and Shropshire to urge the NHS to sit down with us and come up with some new solutions.
Can you
we
wind up,
support
please?
and cherish our NHS talk to us and have a new and objective look at ways forward. We will be saying, think again. This is not good enough for one of the fastest growing towns in our country. We want the headlines, Telford unites, think again about our NHS.
Thank you, Councillor
Burford.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sean Davis.
Mr Speaker, I'd like to second the motion. The decision in regards to the reconfiguration of hospital services is not a decision made by this council. The decision ultimately, Mr Speaker, is made by the Health Secretary. And therefore, Mr Speaker, it is not for us, I don't believe, to put forward a single solution that has already been rejected by local health bosses and by the Health Secretary. It is for us, Mr Speaker, to provide a series of options and a mandate from local people for this rapid feasibility study to be carried out. For too long, Mr Speaker, we've had local health bosses, supported by national health bosses and the government, turning down option after option, despite the fact that there are changing circumstances, as Councillor Burford so elegantly outlined in his speech. So, Mr Speaker, this is a very genuine attempt to ask local health bosses, supported by the regional NHS and the government, to look again at this proposal. Mr Speaker, as I said earlier, if we are going to spend £500 million on a solution, let that solution not pit one part of the county against another, but a solution that supports all communities, and a solution that is not just about hospital buildings, Mr Speaker, but about hospital services, GP access, mental health support, adult social care, all those triggers that stop people going to A&E in the first place and then leaving A&E. Mr Speaker, this council has not just delivered words in regards to this issue. We have also delivered real action. Mr Speaker, the hospital bosses said they couldn't recruit doctors. So what did we do, Mr Speaker? Councillor Raj Mehta arranged a meeting with the Indian consulate. We arranged a fact-finding trip by the hospital recruiters to India to recruit Indian doctors to come here and Indian nurses. Mr Speaker, the local NHS said that they could not recruit junior doctors. So what did we do, Mr Speaker? We and the community refurbished houses on the hospital site, despite opposition from some in this chamber, to be the first hospital site in the country to offer free accommodation for junior doctors. Mr Speaker, they talked about recruiting and retaining middle-grade doctors. So what do we do, Mr Speaker? Through our New Place housing company, we've offered decent deals to NHS workers within a stone's throw of the hospital site. They said they couldn't recruit nurses, Mr Speaker. What did we do? We organised a meeting with the University of Wolverhampton to set up a programme which trains nurses locally and offers them a job at the local NHS. Mr Speaker, they said they couldn't recruit doctors from abroad because of visa restrictions. What did we do? We campaigned for those visa restrictions to be relaxed. Mr Speaker, they said they couldn't recruit nurses because of the grant being removed and replaced by the government with a loan. What did we do, Mr Speaker? We campaigned for that grant to be reintroduced. Mr Speaker, on those issues that we have a direct way to influence the decision, this council will continue to make the case for what's in the best interest of Telford Wrekin. But this decision around hospital reconfiguration is not a decision for this council, it is a decision for the Health Secretary. Don't fall into the trap, members, of being divided, because if we are divided, we are conquered. Mr Speaker, it's time to unite.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any other wish to speak? Councillor Eade.
Yes, I'm somewhat confused, to be quite honest. And I'll quote again, if I can. Councillor Davis said quite recently in the Shropshire Star that he is in favour of a hospital to be centrally located between Telford and Shrewsbury, and that we should unite to lobby for the project to go ahead. Our motion quite clearly said this council supports the provision of a new hospital in between Telford and Shrewsbury. He just voted against it. Furthermore, he said one hospital is what we need, and that he stands ready to lobby with MPs and Peter Nutting to get this hospital built, settling the issue for generations to come. We've offered that, as I've just said, in a motion, and you voted against it. I simply cannot understand the rationale behind this at all. Saying one thing one moment and another thing the next. No wonder we're in the position we're in with the health service. We've got to be quite clear on our objectives with this. Quite clear, we have to set them and we have to go for them. And, you know, this is the fourth sort of option that we've been presented with. It really is not good enough, Speaker. We need some clarity around what exactly we're asking for.
Right. Can I just say that that original motion was lost, right? And the leader of the council says he's been named. Do you wish to make a brief comment?
I have been named, and I'd like to just come back because what's been reflected by the Leader of the Opposition is completely inaccurate in regards to what the position is. The motion that's been defeated does not refer to a single-site hospital solution. It refers to a three-site hospital solution, as he very well knows. He even said it, Mr Speaker, in his contributions to the debate, that the circumstances in that part of the country have now changed to what he was advancing before. Mr Speaker, I've also made very clear through my contributions to this debate, we are not the decision-makers in this case. They've already rejected Councillor Reid's proposal. This is about a grown-up approach to health bosses, and let's not fall into the trap of falling out amongst ourselves in regards to this really vital issue.
Right. Just so everybody is aware, I was out of order, apparently, in inviting Councillor Davis to speak, because somebody being named is not authorising them to speak. I know. I will learn from that mistake. Right. Right. Who was next? Was it Councillor Burr? Anybody else?
Councillor Dugmore.
Councillor Dugmore.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Well, we are where we are with this because we don't know exactly what we do want. We're getting no leadership at all and guidance as to where we're going with this. This particular motion is an attempt to cover as many different opinions as it can in an attempt to gain unanimous support, but there is where it fails. The option of retaining full A&E provision at both sites already been investigated, rejected, not only on cost grounds but also incompatible with how an A&E services are being delivered now. Trying to do it now is impossible due to recruitment issues. The retention of the Women and Children's Centre at PRH is only going to happen if the future fit proposals were reversed, with A&E at PRH and planned care at Shrewsbury. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen either. It's important that we stop fighting battles that have already been lost. As stated before, we have a slim chance to get a third option, which is new hospital facilities between Shrewsbury and Telford. And, you know, if the Shropshire Star has reported the leader's comments wrong, well, then obviously they need to print an apology. But it was clearly stated, well, it was reported, so you need to take it up with the Shropshire Star if they're reporting incorrectly. Supporters of this motion need to ask themselves what's their motivation. Is it better hospital services and outcomes for all communities in the counties, or is it just government bashing and preserving out-of-date services and working practices? Supporting this motion presents the decision makers with a divided community. It makes us look like we don't know we don't want what's being proposed, but we don't know what we do want. So surely we should be getting some definite guidance as to what exactly is required. And obviously, as we've seen tonight, that's not forthcoming. The result being that Future Fit goes ahead as proposed. If that's what you want, well then go ahead. You know, vote for it. This motion has to work together with the MPs. Yet previously, when the opportunities arisen, it's been rejected by this administration. I think the MPs can be forgiven for treating such requests with scepticism. Working with anyone from with their political opponents has been virtually non-existent. The motion's unworkable. The new hospital between Shrewsbury and Telford, which we assumed is what the leader wanted because that's what he said, would result in the loss of A&E at both hospitals, and the Women and Children's Unit, because you'd have new facilities. So, you know, sort of I accept the sentiment behind it, and perhaps the proposer, it could have been worded a bit more, a bit clearer. But quite honestly, it's a totally unworkable motion.
All right, thank you. I think we're repeating.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call for a recorded vote in view of that last contribution, especially. Thank you.
All right, I was just going to invite Councillor Burford, hang on, for his right of reply.
I have to say I'm really disappointed with those last comments. That the motion is, in my view, very clear. We've got a funding envelope at the moment that seems to be 312 million, but goodness knows what it will be by the time we get to the end of it. Now, what is being proposed is that the majority of that money be invested in the crumbling infrastructure of a building. Now, what the NHS's own long-term plan talks about is transforming services. Hence why I emphasised in my opening remarks the importance of looking at non-hospital provision in order to take the pressure off acute care. There's nothing in Future Fit that is doing that at anything like the scale that's required. So the motion is very specific about what's needed. On scrutiny, while I was chairing it, time and time again we asked where the investment in community fit, as I think the Speaker was the origin of that term, where that was. It disappeared. There was initially a small sum of money there for that. It vanished. This is not the transformation that the NHS itself says it wants from services. To just be talking about buildings is not in line with the kind of radical thinking which we need to manage the health system in this county. Whatever acute reconfiguration you have, unless you do something about that, it will continue to be a problem. Do you really think one centre is going to cope when you look at the demand on the RSH and the PRH A&E? Wherever you put it, whatever you do, unless you address these other issues, we will not manage. That's why this solution emphasises the points this motion emphasises the points it does. We are not against any solution which can be made to work and which has that element of restructuring of service within it. But these costings have never been done. This objective work around this framework has never been done, even though we've asked for it time and time again. This is what we're getting at here. It's very clear what we want. I urge you to support this motion.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor McClements, you wish to indicate?
Yes, I'd like to ask for a recorded vote.
Appropriate numbers, please stand. Is that sufficient? Right, that's sufficient, thank you. Deb, can you follow the procedure, please?
Councillor Bentley. Councillor Blundell. Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford. Councillor Callier. Councillor Eric Carter. Councillor Lee Carter. Councillor Davis. Councillor Doug Moore. Councillor Eade. Councillor Arnold England. Councillor Nathan England. Councillor Evans. Councillor Ian Fletcher. Councillor Veronica Fletcher. Councillor Greenaway. Councillor Healy. Councillor Holt. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Yanker. Councillor Jawar. Councillor Jones. Councillor Kiernan. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor McClements. Councillor Mehta. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Overton. Councillor Gilly Reynolds. Councillor Shirley Reynolds. Councillor Steve Reynolds. Councillor Sahota. Councillor Scott. Councillor Seymour. Councillor Charles Smith. Councillor Malcolm Smith. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Karen Tomlinson. Councillor Bill Tomlinson. Councillor Turley. Councillor Watling. Councillor Wright.
Right, declare it carried. Right, I declare the motion carried. Call the meeting to a close and thank you for your attendance and perseverance.